As a literature professor, I'm using this flip through of the Otto Schmidt Tarot as an excuse to nerd out about gender and art. Before I jump in, there are a few caveats. First, my deck is shown with the borders trimmed off, and second, although I have some critiques, I have to admit that I adore this deck and find it to be a fun alternative to the historical RWS when I'm in an easy reading kind of mood. Given the hyper-feminine aesthetic of the Otto Schmidt Tarot, here are some thoughts on representations of the female body in comic book art. Schmidt is a visual artist who has worked for Marvel, DC, and other publishers in the genre, so his deck is a great example to consider. From Wonder Woman to Captain Marvel, female characters have always existed in comic books, but how they've been drawn reveals volumes about politics, power, and who gets to define women's bodies. The 1990s marked a turning point. Female superheroes weren't just strong, they were impossibly proportioned, contorted into broke-back poses that emphasized certain physical attributes while defying actual anatomy. This wasn't just about aesthetics. As feminist critics pointed out, these exaggerated depictions reflected a medium created primarily by men for men, reducing complex characters to visual eye candy. When a female character is drawn with her secondary sexual characteristics impossibly displayed while fighting crime, we're not seeing her as a hero. We're seeing her as an object for consumption. The power fantasy becomes sexual fantasy. Because let's be real, it would be pretty inconvenient to somersault without a support bra or high kick a villain while wearing a thong. The rise of female artists, writers, and editors has dramatically shifted this landscape. Characters like the young Ms. Marvel and indie comic heroines demonstrate that female bodies can be portrayed with agency rather than objectification. This evolution isn't merely about covering up characters, it's about asking who these stories serve. When female characters are drawn with realistic proportions and practical costumes, it signals that women are welcome as readers, not just as pinups. The battle over how women's bodies appear in comics continues because it's never been just about drawings. It's about who has the power to define women's roles, not just in fantastical universes, but in our own. Getting back to the Otto Schmidt Tarot, I'm not saying that its exaggerated representations of women's bodies is necessarily a flaw. After all, I like this deck. But these images should challenge us as tarot readers to reflect on how we engage with the Otto Schmidt Tarot and decks like it, and the way we link the power of these archetypes to the bodies used to represent them.